Hello and welcome back. Now, I know I said I was going to work on some sci-fi stuff for a while, but I've managed to get sidetracked again and I've been working on some gravestones instead, like the ones that you can see here. And as always, you can find a link to the PDF file for these down in the description. So, sorry about that, but let's make a start on these. Okay then, so if we start at the top of the page, we can begin by roughly cutting out one of the gravestone textures, and we're going to be gluing that to some foam core. And in this example, I'm using some that's 3mm thick. So I'll go ahead and do just that, just using a regular glue stick, and then we'll cut out a piece of the plain stone pattern that's around the same size as the foam core, and stick that to the back. So there you go, this is the kind of thing that we're aiming for. Then, once that's dry, we'll cut it to size, and we'll then cut out a strip of the plain stone texture that's the same width as the foam core, so that's 3mm in this example, and we'll apply some glue to the back of that, and then simply wrap that around the outside to cover up the exposed edge. And with any luck, that should result in something like this. Okay, now all we'll need to do is make a base, and for this I've just glued some of the ground texture to some thick card and cut it into a 1" by 1/2" rectangle. And while you could use a bit of hot glue for this next part, I'm just going to kind of paint on a line of PVA to the bottom of the gravestone and stick that to the middle of the base. And there you go, there's the finished gravestone, though we can add a bit of variety to these. So, for example, for this one here, for the kind of little plinth that it's standing on, I've just made that by wrapping a bit of foam core in the stone pattern, and for this larger one, I've just made it out of 5mm thick foam core, just to make it look a bit more substantial. Plus, here's the ones that I showed at the beginning of the video, and they've just had the bottom cut at a slight angle to make them look as though they're leaning off to one side, and I've also added a few bits and pieces from some of the other episodes, just to mix things up a bit. So yeah, that's those done. Right then, so moving down the page, next we'll take two of these textures and stick them to some cardboard. It doesn't really matter what kind, just so long as it's not super thin, and then we'll cut those out. Then we'll glue this texture to some thin cereal box style card, but before we cut it out, we'll score it along these lines here, so that we can fold it into this kind of shape when we do cut it to size. Okay, so to glue it together, we'll take the glue gun and apply some hot glue to the inside edge of the two central sections of the thin card, just so that we can glue the two sloping sides of the end piece into place, so that it looks something like this. Then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. And when that's done, it's just a simple matter of folding out the sides, applying a little blob of glue to each of the corners, and then folding them back into place. And of course, we'll need to do that for both sides, and this is how that should look when the glue's set. Something like that. Okay, so now we'll just need to make one of the larger gravestones, making sure that it's one where there's no text at the bottom, and all we're going to do is glue these two pieces together. So, there you go, that's all we're aiming for, just something that looks a bit more impressive than a simple headstone. Okay then, so for this next piece, we're going to glue one of the large rectangular grave markers to some thick card, and then cut that to size. Next we'll take some foam core, I'm using the 3mm thick stuff again, and cut that to the size that you can see here on the screen. Then we'll cut out a piece of the plain stone texture that's big enough to wrap around that foam core piece, and glue that into place. It's the kind of thing you've seen me do lots of times before. Then, just using a bit of PVA glue again, though you could probably just use a glue stick if you prefer, we're just going to stick the smaller piece on top of the larger one, so that we end up with this kind of thing, the kind of grave marker that lies flat on the ground. Okay, so moving down the page again, here I've just taken this texture and glued it to some thick card, and all we're going to do with this one is use the oval shape as a kind of guide for building up a little mound of hot glue, which is what you can see me doing here. Though it is worth pointing out that we'll need to do that 2 or 3 times, building up the mound in several stages and letting the glue dry in between, so I'll just leave the video running while I'm doing that. So there you go, and as you can hopefully see, I've also tried to make it look a little bit lumpy, rather than being totally smooth. Anyway, next we'll cut out this texture, and we'll scrunch that up several times to make it nice and malleable. And it also helps if you make lots of little cuts all the way around the outside of this piece. So there you go. Next we'll apply some glue to the back, being careful not to tear it, and then it's just a matter of kind of draping that over the mound of hot glue and sticking it down so that it looks a bit like a pile of dirt. So here's how it should look when we've done that, and as you can see, there's space over on the left hand side to stick a gravestone, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So here I am just adding a bit of PVA again, and then sticking that into place. And there you go. There's something that looks more like a recent burial. You know, should we ever need anything like that. And if you plan on making a few of these, you can just use different headstones, so that they don't all look exactly the same. Okay, now for this next piece, we'll glue the texture to some thick card again, and as you can see, this time I've built up a large mound of hot glue ahead of time, again, just making sure to keep it all inside the marked out circle. Then we'll cut out the circular dirt pattern and scrunch that up like we did before. And we'll also need to make lots of little cuts all around the outside. Next we'll just apply some glue to the back and do a similar thing to the last piece, you know, where we drape this texture over the hot glue and kind of squish it down on top. Okay then, so now that's done, here's another gravestone, this time with the bottom cut at an angle, just to make it look as though it's leaning to one side, and that then needs to be glued into place. So here I am doing that, just using a bit of PVA again. And there you go, there's the finished piece. So hopefully that looks like a grave that someone has dug up recently, for whatever reason. Though I do want to point out that you can also make this one as two separate pieces. For example, here's just the open grave, which you could use on its own if you like. And if you really want to go to town, you could also add a few pieces from some of the other PDFs, like you can see here. Though in this example, I did print the coffin out at 90%, just so that it looks like it can actually fit inside the hole. So yeah, this one here, this is probably my favourite piece in the set. Anyway, moving on, next we're going to glue these two textures to some cardboard, it doesn't really matter much what kind again, and cut those to size. Next we'll glue this pattern to some thin card, and we'll also need to score it along these lines here, so that we can cut it out and bend it into this kind of shape. Okay then, so using the glue gun, we'll first apply some glue to the edge of the middle square piece, if that makes sense, and then glue the top of one of the side panels into place. Then we'll repeat the process on the other side, and then it's just a matter of adding some glue to the other edges and folding them back into place so that the whole thing forms a kind of obelisk shape. And if it's all gone according to plan, this is the kind of thing that we should be left with. Right then, so next we'll cut out a piece of thin foam core that's around 3/4 of an inch square, and we'll also cut out a piece of thick card that's 1 inch square. And all we're going to be doing with these is wrapping them in some more of the plain stone texture, so that when we're done, we end up with two pieces that look something like this. Then all we'll need to do is glue the 1 inch piece to the bottom of our little obelisk, and as you can see, I'm using some hot glue for this. And then we'll glue the smaller piece to the top. This time I'm using some PVA. So there you go, there's a kind of stone monument of sorts, and if you like you could leave it looking like that, but if we wanted to make it look a bit more like an actual obelisk, we can glue this texture to some thin card and score it along these lines here. Then we can cut it out and fold it into a little tiny pyramid almost, as you can see, and to help us glue it together, we'll also cut out a 1/4 inch length of a drinking straw, or something similar. Next we'll just hot glue the straw to the middle of the inside of that little pyramid piece, so something like that, and then we'll add a generous blob of hot glue to the top and the outside of that straw, so that when we fold the card back into that little pyramid shape, each of the 4 sides is being pressed into the glue. So there you go, here it is now that the glue is set, and the only thing left to do now is glue it to the top, which is what you can see me doing here. And there you have it. There's the finished piece, and like I say, it's just some kind of stone monument, just to add some extra variety to the graveyard. Okay, for this final piece, we're going to glue this stair texture to some thick card. The stuff I'm using is around 1mm thick, and we're going to glue this texture to some slightly thicker card, if you have it, though it's not all that important, and you can just use the same stuff that you used for the stairs. Then we're just going to cut both of those to size, like you can see here, and then using some PVA or a regular glue stick, we'll need to stick the kind of frame piece on top of the stair piece, and rest something heavy on top so that it dries nice and flat. And when that's dry, this is how it should look. It's fairly straightforward stuff. Anyway, next we'll cut out a strip of the stone texture that's the same thickness as the combined height of the 2 pieces that we just stuck together. Then we'll apply some glue to the back and stick that around the outside. And if I just cut away some of the excess, there you go. That's the first part of this particular piece done. Okay, for the second part, we'll glue another of the stone slabs to some thick card, and then cut that to size. And we'll do something similar with this blank rectangle, which, if you've made everything else so far, this should be the last piece left on the page. Though I will say that, for this last piece, try to use thinner card than the stuff that you used for the frame, if that makes sense. Anyway, all that's left to do now is glue this small piece onto the back of the stone slab, making sure to get it roughly in the middle, and placing something heavy on top to ensure it dries flat. Okay, so now that that's dry, here's the stairs piece, and here's the piece that we just made, and the idea here is that if we take both of these pieces, we can slot that little blank piece into the hole over the stairs, and now it looks like a pretty mundane grave marker, you know, like the one that we made earlier in the episode, i.e. this one here. And in-game, that could be uncovered when the characters go rooting around in the graveyard perhaps, and that could lead down into, well, whatever you want it to lead down into. Probably some kind of dungeon, I'm guessing. But yeah, I think that's everything done. Though, as you can see in this picture, as well as making them all as individual scatter pieces, you can also make complete graveyard tiles as well. And if you like, you can also add a couple of creepy trees from episode 73, as I think they work really well together. Anyway, I think that's it for this episode, but before I go, I do want to say that if you're a Patreon supporter, or a member here on YouTube, then just after this video is released, there'll be a post on both of those platforms, and without sounding too morbid, if you want to maybe get one of your characters or NPC's name on a gravestone, you know, maybe a character that died heroically in a recent campaign or something like that, then if you reply to that post and tell me what to write, I'll make a bonus PDF that features gravestones for all of these characters, and I'll make it available to everyone for free. I'll just upload it to Google Drive or something similar. So yeah, all that's left to say is thank you very much for watching. If I were a smarter person, I would have probably held this video back for a Halloween special or something like that, but yeah, what can I say? Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.